Hi guys, the long-awaited Ukrainian counteroffensive finally started. The Russian army is completely shocked and literally running away from the battlefield. It's hard to believe, but within less than 5 days, all the Russian front in the Kharkiv direction has completely fallen and Ukraine regained more land than Russia managed to occupy within the last 5 months. Russian officials and propagandists were completely shocked and didn't know how to report that misery. But yesterday the Russian army broke the silence and told the public that it was a planned relocation of troops to Donbas regions where they are more needed. To understand what actually happened and why, we need to look into what has changed within the last 2 months since Ukraine announced the occupation of its lands. Everyone assumed that the first occupation region would be the Kherson area. It's separated from the rest of occupied territories by the huge Dnieper River and there are only 3 bridges. 2 in Kherson city, 1 pedestrian and 1 railway, and another one in Novokakhovka, 50 kilometers away to the east. Both within a range of Ukrainian HIMARS system, and 2 months ago it was clear that these bridges would be eventually destroyed and the Russian army would be trapped there. So it's naturally the easiest area to start liberation. From the strategic point of Russia, that region is not too important, so it would have been wise to leave the region and focus on keeping defending the rest of occupied land which connects Russia with Crimea. But Putin doesn't admit military reality, he just needs to save his ass. Losing Kherson would mean leaving the largest city captured in the war so far, and Russian propaganda already said that Russia will stay there forever. Therefore, Putin ordered to relocate a huge number of troops there to prevent any counteroffensive. Ukraine could have destroyed the bridges and prevent this to happen, but the commandment decided that it's better to postpone the liberation of Kherson for a couple of months, but have more Russian soldiers being trapped there. Russian army is neither designed for defense nor it was trained for that. So Putin in addition transferred a bunch of commanders and was planning to move the main war theater from Donbas to Kherson with the goal of capturing the city of Mykolaiv, which Russia failed to do in the first phase of the war. When all the soldiers were transferred to Kherson, Ukraine destroyed all the bridges and was waiting for Russians to move. But nothing really happened for 2 months. Why is that? 3 things. First, all promised 16 HIMARS are in Ukraine along with plenty of super precise missiles which can shoot within 90-kilometer range, which are really good in destroying all Russian armed depot and temporary bridges through the river. Now Russia must store all the ammunition far away from the front, which is in case of Kherson means another side of the river, and without bridges this makes logistics a total nightmare. Without a huge amount of artillery missiles, there is no way Russia can do any reasonable offense. Second, NATO-modified MiGs and Sus jet fighters were delivered, allowing Ukraine to use anti-radar HARMS missiles. They are really old and no longer used in US Army, but work extremely well against Russian S-300 anti-missile systems, which are quite old as well. As the result, the Russian anti-missile system got destroyed in the area and Ukraine can fly there again, meaning that Bayraktar drones, which were so efficient in the first part of the war, are back in the game. At the same time, Russia can't fly over Ukrainian territory because of newly delivered anti-missile system, and it's hard to make any offense without air support. Finally, M26 artillery rockets and MRLS system for them. These are very imprecise and old stuff which US is no longer use, and in 2018 all of them were supposed to be destroyed by the directive coming from the Obama era, but luckily Trump cancelled that order, saving the old ammunitions. Now all of them were delivered to Ukraine for the utilization. Basically, M26 are cheap and abundant and can be used indiscriminately during the offense in range of 15 to 30 kilometers. HIMARS are incomparably better, but they are sparse and they can only be used for important military targets. Because of this, Russia can't attack and must defend now. 20,000 plus of Russian soldiers around Kherson is still no joke, and Ukraine needs to have 2-3 times more troops for a successful offense in a classic war scenario, which Ukraine currently lacks. The only winning strategy is to trick the enemy. Ukraine started a very slow counteroffensive in Kherson area by so-called sabotage and reconnaissance groups, which enters incognito into the enemy territory and suddenly attack the defense line, creating chaos and making enemy troops leave the position. Suddenly Ukraine made a big surprise by simultaneously attacking from the east. As you know, the largest group of Russian troops are in Kherson, the second largest are in Donbas. But there are other occupied areas like one around Kharkiv, which had way less of soldiers and the most dumb ones. The two largest concentration of them were in cities of Izium and Vovchansk. On September 6, Ukrainian forces started to heavily use M26 artillery around the Russian defensive line to make Russians to hide into trenches. Then, sabotage and reconnaissance groups entered and found a weak spot across the multiple defense lines, causing enemy soldiers to flee in chaos. This created a corridor through which a very limited number of Ukrainian tanks and armored vehicles managed to enter. The plan was to move quickly, avoid all the cities and capture the road around Kupiansk, which was the main supply line for units in Izium. Since there is a river on the east of Izium and Ukrainian forces on the south, that would mean an encirclement and later an easy destruction of unprepared Russian forces inside it. Suddenly, a true miracle happened. As soon as Ukrainians reached the outskirts of Bakalia, which is 50 kilometers inside the occupied land, Russian forces decided to quickly flee from the town, leaving armored vehicles, weapons, clothes, and even stolen Ukrainian washing machines, which they planned to send back to Siberia. Apparently, the Russian army is not ready to die for Putin, and just a couple of tanks on the horizon makes a huge panic among extremely unmotivated soldiers. The city fell without any fights on September 8. On September 9, Ukrainian forces were already in outskirts of Kupiansk and Izium, the main road was captured, and Russians started to flee from there as well. Finally, on September 10, both cities were captured with minimal fights. The current map looks like this, but the situation is developing right now. The city of Vovchansk no longer has any strategic interest, and according to the rumors, Russians already left it as of today. If that's true, Ukraine is set to regain the border control in all Kharkiv region. What was Putin doing in the meantime? Well, he was very happy in the military strategic exercise Vostok 2022. Russian forces did extremely well there. And yesterday he opened an enormous Ferris wheel in Moscow for the City Day, which ended up with big fireworks. All the crazy Russian pro-war supporters are mad and outraged, accusing Putin of cancelling the war and giving back all the cities without fighting. A known FSB-affiliated terrorist, Igor Strelkov, openly calls Putin a betrayer. And for some reason he's still not being taken into custody. It seems like Putin is slowly losing his power. For the rest of normal Russians, the propaganda announced that it was not an escape but planned relocation of the forces which are more needed in Donbas region. Well, right, Russia can't lose and everything goes according to the plan. We heard that many times. The problem with that statement is that Ukraine right now is attacking the city of Liman, which is part of Donbas. The reports are mixed, but it's more than real that Ukraine can take that town as well. One pro-Russian activist recently wrote on Telegram that Russia was taking Liman for 2 months and now Ukraine is about to take it within a couple of days. Now back to Kherson. The situation there is very different. Ukraine captured some villages with the goal of cutting the Russian forces there into halves, slowly moving to the Nova Kakhovka bridge. So far, it's very far from completion, and considering there is no significant changes within the last couple of days, I assume that Ukrainian advancement there will be tough and slow. The only way to win there is to trick and exhaust the enemy. Here I can speculate that Ukraine is waiting for a long time promised kamikaze drone. There were some issues in the past and the drones haven't been used in the war at all, but the US companies seem to fix all the bugs and a big delivery is coming this month. These can be very effective for triggering panic among defenseless Russian troops by destroying them one by one, and Kherson is an ideal place to test them. Generally speaking, to win the war, Ukraine needs more weapons. One of the most crucial things are armored vehicles and tanks. These are almost non-existent and it's hard to move soldiers without them in 21st century. Another game-changer toy would be a long-range ATACMS missiles for HIMARS with 300 km range. These can destroy faraway weapon depot and quickly change the situation, particularly in Donbas. Instead of Kherson, Ukraine can take Donetsk. That event would trigger even larger tectonic shifts in Russia. This is a town of almost 1 million people and basically the whole ideological point of the war. Currently the front line is extremely close to the city, meaning that you don't need much armored vehicles or tanks to move around, just significantly cut the supply from Russia, destroy anti-missiles as it was done in Kherson, and special forces can enter to the city. The US and allies are still not ready to provide that, but the opinion moves in the right direction. The West's strategy against Putin seems to give enough weapons to Ukraine, but not too much, assuming that Putin or his surrounding finally admits that the war is completely lost and start reasonable peace negotiations according to the military reality. What is crucial, 2 months ago, the West and Ukraine were happy to return to pre-February 24th borders, plus huge war indemnity. Now the situation completely changed. Ukraine and US are talking about borders of 1991, meaning that Crimea and all Donbas region must go back to Ukraine. That's a tectonic shift. Previously, the US was not officially recognized Crimea as Russian, but de facto considered its Russian territory with status quo and prohibited Ukraine to use its weaponry there. As you know, last month, Sakhy air base in Crimea was destroyed. We still don't know exactly how it happened, but if you look at the map, it's clearly very far from the front line. This created panic among regular people and completely changed the mood of locals about the future of the peninsula. Recently, the Ukrainian side actively promotes the idea that Crimea will be next and the Crimean bridge must be destroyed as an illegal construction. Two things are interesting here. First, the official Russian reaction. Previously, Putin was threatening with huge consequences if Russia territory would be attacked. But nothing happened after Crimea. Propaganda lied as always that someone smoked a cigarette on the base which accidentally detonated the weaponry and destroyed all the warplanes. Yep, right. Many commentators were speculating that Putin was rushing with referendums on annexed territories so that later he can threaten Ukraine with nuclear weapons according to Russian doctrine. This theory seems to be false and referendums are being cancelled. The second interesting thing is that Ukraine is clearly not planning to take Crimea in the nearest future for obvious reasons. The US clearly understands this as well, and the point here is to convince Russian elites and Russian publics that this is real and is on agenda. If you don't want this, depose Putin and finish the war, and return all the lands to Ukraine without Crimea, which can potentially become a demilitarized zone with status quo. The West would surely agree with that scenario, but at this point this is my pure speculation. Does Putin understand that the war is lost? Sure thing. That is why he tries to negotiate a peace deal at all costs to be able to keep most of the newly occupied lands with status quo. Putin has a bunch of agents in the West who are repeatedly saying that the peace must be negotiated diplomatically. He even asked Turkish President Erdogan to negotiate peace with Zelensky, promising Turkey more lands in Armenia and Syria just to have this minuscule chance of a peace deal. Putin tried to escalate the situation on nuclear station, claiming that Ukraine is shelling it despite clear evidence that it's not, even inviting the International Atomic Energy Agency, another useful international bureaucracy, largely sponsored by Russia, and the report is completely useless but tells us that both sides need to stop the war. Ha ha ha. Putin even stopped the gas pipeline to Europe, waiting for huge social unrest, but nothing happened and the price of gas actually went down. What about general Russian people? There are some people who support war and some people who are against them, but most of these folks don't really follow the war. And both of these groups believe that Ukraine can't fully win and take all its land back. There is a common myth that Russia hasn't started yet, and there is a hidden potential, lots of weapons, and Putin can send more cannon fodder to die. And there is absolutely no way Crimea can be retaken by Ukraine. They don't understand that if Putin asks the missiles from North Korea and drones from Iran, then he is in a serious desperation and Russian army has serious problems. With the recent development in Kharkiv, the opinion will likely to shift a bit, but the only way to change it fully is to capture Kherson or Donetsk. Let's see how the situation develops. October can be a very interesting month. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you soon. Bye.